Dalit Christian organizations have been going to the court, have been, campaigning, have tried to move private, members' bill in the parliament, and there seems to be an all-round, completely overlooking of this into this injustice. But there have, of course, been no attention paid to it. An interesting case I will give you is from Kerala, which is recent. It's documented in the book. So an interesting case is from Kerala, which is Mr. K.P. Manu, who was a government employee, belonged to scheduled caste Kulayas amongst in Kerala, those who from Kerala would know. And Mr. Manu's forefather, 3 or 4 generations earlier, had converted to Christianity. So Mr. Manu was also born a Christian of a Kulaya caste. He, using SC, reservation. Ten years ago or so. The Supreme Court says that since Mr. K.P. Manu is now back into Hinduism, his caste, eclipsed for 4 or 5 generations, has now been revived. He can easily be extended the benefit of SC status. What in effect the court is doing is, legally facilitating the process of Ghar Wapsi. The Ghar Wapsi campaign, it's an RSS campaign arguing that all those who have gone out of the Hindu fold can come back. And so this is a facilitation. Because there is also a question and answer session, so a lot of questions will be picked up there. I just would like to conclude by saying that this book, I hope, will, it just offers a lens to understand the present. It relies on the past to do so. But it also, interrogates the past when the past is glorified. And some of our own comrades might be doing it, those on our side as well. By this whole project of our idea of India versus what is called the New India. The New India, in the liberal common sense, is full of all these kinds of activities, violence, etc., and partialities, and people being pushed to the margins, etc. But the idea of India was wonderful. So this book also goes into the past to see that whether there were certain kind of leakages there as well, and whether those leakages have contributed into the situation as we have reached. Thank you.
Now we will directly open the session for questions. We will take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. But just to kickstart the discussion, I'll start with a question of my own, which is sort of a repetitive question, but which I picked up from the discussions and others talk. So there is a mention of, like you said, the idea of India, which is the Indian tolerance, which is equated to the Hindu tolerance. And how this argument, you also brought up Shashi Tharoor in the beginning of the first chapter, that how these arguments actually strengthens the Hindu arguments as well. So I was just, it's my understanding that this idea is also assimilated and incorporated by the Muslim minds of India as well. Or in other words, let's say that the secular the Hindu majoritarian secularism is the popular discourse, and which is appropriated by the Muslims in India as well. So the cow vigilantes now don't need to wear the cloak of secularism anymore, because they don't need to wear the cloak of secularism anymore, because they can, the state missionaries are already in the so-called neutrality or support of, it has received some sort of majoritarian support as well. But the Muslims maybe still not, at least in the popular sense, not able to discern this cloak as such. So, do you think that this context actually creates a sort of cripples the imagining of Muslim politics in such a context? Is my question.
I think everyone can reflect on this question. But I believe you have understood the question right. You were suggesting that. Is it right? Hello? Yeah. I believe that hello. I believe your question is that is saying probably in this whole kind of what you say secular majority, that there is a section of the Muslims also who seem to be complicit or buying it.
I was thinking that my argument was that in this majority idea, which is the popular discourse nowadays, which is appropriated by the Muslim mindset. When we think of imagining Muslim politics, does it create, does it cripple? How is the political? Is there a political importance?
I would say the situation as we see today, this is the seed. Usually, the narrative which emerges from state quarters. I'll come here then. So narratives emerging from state quarters are pushed through the power of the state, and here we see also how there seems to be huge endorsement from the national public. What is discussed in the national media, for instance, and the way in which it presents these things. It comes with a huge power, at its command, and which many would start finding some kind of a merit in it as well. So as I mentioned earlier, the case of criminalization of the triple talaq, that a good section of the people, and particularly those who are feminists, etc., saw merit in it, and they thought, and continue to think probably, that this whole appeasement thesis was not entirely wrong. That there were, certain kind of, excesses done just for vote banks, Now, if you imagine Muslim politics as such, I think that Muslims need to be political. Every section of the population in the country needs to be political, particularly those who see themselves as deprived. But in my opinion, there is nothing which can, specifically define what Muslim politics is. The Muslimness in politics. Because, in my understanding first, there is a diversity amongst Muslims, and therefore, the political priorities of a Tamil Muslim may be different from that of a Bihari Muslim. So one is that. However, what is important is to the extent to which we are able to see points where solidarities can be built. Now, that is difficult. That is difficult particularly because the margin, or those who constitute the margin, have different ideas of what is marginality all about. Some would think that their experience of being untouchable is something which makes them marginal. Some might think that because they constitute the working class poor, that's why they are marginal, and therefore there could be different priorities in politics itself. And similarly, say the Bengali Muslims in Assam, 1.9 million were excluded from the NRC. Majority of them would be Bangla-speaking Muslims. We don't have figures about religious persuasion or of those who have been excluded so far, but estimates can be made because these were the targets. Now within Assam also you have a section of the Muslims, native Assamese, who would also be participant in this whole project of excluding the Bengali-speaking Muslims. So that is what I mean, that Muslimness as such in what constitutes the Muslim politics will be difficult to arrive at. However, there could be solidarities built with different organizations, different groups facing similar situations, or trying to understand that what constitutes marginality and where those common points of interaction can be. So that is a task which can be arrived at through constant political engagement between, and without that it cannot simply be intellectualized. So that is what I think it has to be the future of Muslims in politics.
So there are many questions to finalize. So I think we'll just conclude the session for now.
One question. One is legal and another is academic or constitution. There has been a debate on fundamental rights. The Supreme Court has discussed about the three important fundamental rights that is right that is to be made in the Constitution. The Article 21, 14 are the important fundamental rights. And for community that comes from a religious community, Article 25 is subject to all other fundamental rights. Now when we are talking about fundamental rights, there is a lot of debate of what kind of person needs to know the fundamental rights to be given. But that is not really defined, or it is not debated the legal term, the legal field. And also, I have to say the academic. I may be wrong, but I am not sure about that. Are there any discussions about what kind of person is there representing and to whom these fundamental rights are given? Unless that is not been defined. Because another question is related to legal. It is legal as no slur. Is there any discussion about how can we tackle these slurs that are coming up? Unless we talk about the definition of slur, these are the questions that I am proposing that we answer. Fundamental rights. We do know that there is something called rights that are interdependent, universal, and there is certain kind of symbiotic relationship of rights. So, Article 14, Article 19, and Article 21, these two are very so I mean the violation of say right to be violated, which is Article 14, equal protection of the law and equality of law. That would also amount to any kind of say inequality is against the idea of dignity, which is protected in Article 21. So like of course freedom of movement and freedom of any kind of freedom, say, Article 19, citizen freedom, so rights are not, given to, just by being citizen of India, all the rights are extended to all the communities and all the people. So it's not specified particularly that only
these sort of people will be given the right and rest will be excluded, right? Just you being citizens of India, you are going to get those rights because of the fundamental rights. Okay. So, I mean, about Article 25, there has been always kind of questions on that in terms of like why Article 25 is misused say in a legal, I mean, in legality, for example, that gives in exceptional cases that gives a lot of scope. For example, what is public morality, right? What do we mean by health, for example, right? That creates this exceptional ground for the state to kind of become invasive and taking away rights and access. So, and in fact, in this book also, author is revoking, Hyderabad, George Hyderabad, who is known for this theory of, exception, state as exception, zone of exception and emergency, where all the modern state in a way creates those emergency clauses. And even in Article 25 and Article 19, we find those exceptional grounds where state kind of creates that emergency situation. Where it's like during even COVID-19, we saw that the state wanted to. The state was rather very active to invoke those emergency clauses, emergency laws, because that was the opportune time for the state to encroach into even those spaces which were kind of democratic or rather, encased by public. So the state wanted to kind of, enter into those spaces and kind of, create that exception. Okay, yeah, you have any comment?
My concern is not about the fundamental rights. There is a person who is sitting there to whom the fundamental rights is given. So that is not being defined. That is not yet being debated. There are fundamental rights, but what kind of person is there? Like Professor Anand has talked about population. Now someone is going to place a placard and say that he wants Islam and he will change. Someone talks about infrastructure, says that presume that it is an infrastructure, it is a national honor. So now this is a political discussion that is going on. It is not illegal, or he will not be behind bars. Now when we talk about the Constitution says that these fundamental rights are being given to a person.
Yeah.
So this person, if someone coming from this generation, or let's say he is a person of faith or a religion. But for him, Article 25, as per the liberal democratic framework, Article 25 is subservient to the other fundamental rights. Now, if a person who comes to whom the faith is very near and dear, now this imagination of Article 25 subservient will not match with his expectations. So it is not that person who is sitting there, the person that is being defined in the Constitution. It is not the person who is coming from the person of faith. Is there any discussion with regard to that definition of that person? Because the idea of person, we are talking about the rights that are being given to the person. But now there is a presumption that the person to whom the fundamental rights is being guaranteed is a person from the liberal imagination or liberal secular world. Now the crisis, my understanding is this. From there, this question arises. It's not, that is not the question that I was trying to make go for.
I think fundamental rights are fundamental because they are unqualified. All right. So they, therefore, they are applicable to every person, irrespective of how you define the humanity. In terms of a tradition-bearing person or a modern individual who claims to be free of all these encumbrances. So a religious person has similar kinds of rights which a non-religious person may have. There I don't think that this discussion around who will be the bearer of these rights, if we allow qualifications there, it would probably, I think, in my understanding, despite the good intentions of the people who do so, but it would be counterproductive to the whole idea about a right being inviolable. The moment we introduce various different kinds of qualifications. That is why when I was talking about citizenship rights, I would insist that there could be good reasons that why a certain class of citizens can be allowed to become members of the Indian based on their religious, ethnic qualification. But if these are the factors which begin to be considered, making such kind of exceptions, it leads to a situation in which we have there are theories about differentiated citizenship, but that is in the context of the debate around cultural rights, etc. But here is a situation in which inclusion and exclusion are to be considered, and I believe that theories or definitions should be as inclusive as possible, particularly when it comes to the question of rights or question of citizenship. So that is where I would, that is how I would respond to your question.
Just to add, see, again, I think the core arguments have been made, but for example, the idea, I think the cardinal association is between rights and citizenship, right? Now, one can always be anxious about who gets defined as a citizen, something that Tanvir had already sort of underlined. So rights, of course, remain with the citizen. Now, who gets defined as a citizen? That is something that perhaps requires more deliberation. So there is no qualification except the fact that there are citizens and there are rights and there's a certain contract between the state and the citizen. Now, one of the concerns, of course, is in relation to the ways in which Indian secularism works. So there are two things. One is what we call intra-religious domination. So in intra-religious domination, the case is within a community, let's say there is a particular sect or there is a particular sub-community that is discriminated against. So if you take the case of untouchability, right? So caste question, or the question of gender, or the question of sexuality, etc. Now, if on the basis of my gender I am discriminated against, this is a case of what we call intra-religious domination. Now here, the Indian state is going to intervene. Because in Indian secularism, the state is reformist. So the state is going to make an intervention. Now, to what extent a state can make an intervention, there are people who find this not acceptable. There are people who think this is an absolutely cardinal idea, value about Indian secularism. So that is one. Now, pertaining to this, we can always think about why the state kind of intervenes more often here and not so often there, right? That is one. The other is, again, when we discuss the relationship, so whenever we discuss secularism, there are three relationships. One is the relationship that I have with my religion. In that relationship, the state is excluded. It's called religious liberty. Then there is a relationship that the state has with me. It's citizenship. Religion is excluded. But again, in CA, what happens is that gets compromised. So once again, the question of citizenship right now is to be debated. Unfortunately, it has not really been debated as much as it should have. So once the idea of citizenship itself undergoes a certain transformation for the wrong reasons, then of course the question of rights also undergo a certain, they go through a certain situation where we have to kind of deliberate and think about it. And lastly, in relation to intra-religious domination, the state always swears by right to equality as the ultimate parameter. So your right to religion is one thing, but if your right to equality gets compromised, then your right to religion will be secondary. And this has been the case in relation to untouchability offences. This has been, of course, that's the argument in relation to the Triple Talaq Amendment 2019. So rights, of course, have to do with citizenship, but who gets to be identified And more importantly, who lives citizenship, right? That's another debate. So there's a feminist discussion on citizenship as well. Private citizens and public citizens, etc. So are women really able to experience their citizenship as much as men? Well, that's a question we might want to think about on our own. So rights are there. One is, I might not be able to exercise my rights because of various circumstances. The other is, the state creates situations wherein I'm not able to exercise my rights as much as I would want to. So these are questions that keep coming to us, and I think these questions have acquired more prominence of late in the past 10 years, 15 years plus. So that's all.
Dr. Nipan. I'm sure you have many more questions, but maybe we can have informal chats later, discussing all the after the session is over. So we'll conclude the session for now, this book discussion forum. Thank you, Dr. Trajectories, and thank you, Dr. So I'd like to invite Dr. Mohammed Rizwan to present the window to Dr. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed Rizwan. I'd like to invite Abdul Hafiz to present the mementos to Dr. Irfan Rahman. And I would like to invite Faraz Ahmed to present the memento to Dr. Irfan. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to discussants and the author. We'll wind up the session, and for the audience we have food arrangements, and so we move for a prayer and namaz. The namaz and for now.
Inshallah, for ladies, the lunch and prayer is arranged here in the on the ground floor in the canteen. Lunch and as well as namaz. For gents, you have to walk a little.